with you here today, Erez, at PDAC 2026. Maybe we could just start off looking at your current investment focus. What are you working on right now?
Well, my focus is critical minerals, but that's a pretty big list, especially in the U.S. The list is, I think, 61 minerals these days, and copper, which is really critical, was added only recently. So I'm still on the investment committee of the Traxys Group, actually, which is great. And you probably saw that Traxys is now going to be one of the executors of Project Vault. The strategic, how should we even call it? Yeah, reserve and emergency inventory that the United States is developing. I'm keeping myself busy these days, mostly with being on the board and the sort of target acquisition team for two SPACs that listed recently in NASDAQ, Evolution Global Acquisition 1 and 2. And we raised $240 million and $300 million, and we're looking to invest in materials that basically, and projects that sort of tick the box of mineral security equals national security, but in a broader sense, not just from a military perspective, but also in terms of digital infrastructure, fortifying and expanding the grid so it can actually support everything AI, quantum computing, and digital, medical, of course, electromobility, and backup systems and everything that has to do with that. So that's something that I'm focused on, and I'm also an investor and an advisor to a few very interesting junior companies in gold, uranium, and copper.
With your role as an investor, are you finding exciting new opportunities? Are there great new juniors out there that are investable?
I think there are, yes. I think that despite all the all the whining, exploration is back and prospecting is back, and the understanding that we need to bring some proper world-class type of resources into production. Besides just handing them over from one investor to another, is starting, I think, to sink in. And we're also seeing in the United States, in Canada, to some extent in Europe, sort of private-public de facto partnerships developing, because especially on the technology side, but now we're seeing beyond that also in terms of expedited permitting and grants to push projects forward. We're seeing that there is sort of this development, and I think this is something that makes projects investable in many ways, because thinking even a little bit after the discovery was made and the resource was defined and the right technology or processing approach is sort of matched, you reach a point where you have a conditional grant, a conditional project finance loan, probably from a combination of an ECA and a consortium of commercial banks, but you still need the equity component and you still need to be listed. So the TSX, the NASDAQ, the ASX, obviously, are important tools, and we see, that the governments are even sometimes taking equity positions, but this whole structure where the private sector and the public sector are cooperating, and then typically they'll also use one of the platforms which enable institutions and retails, and eventually the average Joe, to also enjoy the upside. So I'm optimistic.
So you mentioned Project Vault coming out of the U.S. Are we seeing like material? It's still fairly new days, but do you think there's going to be actual material results coming out of that? Are they ready to deploy funds already?
I think yes. I think funds are definitely ready to deploy at the moment. I think without going into too many details, the exact structure and mechanics are still in progress. But if you think about it, in essence, companies like Traxys and other global international traders, in a way, they're a private vault, because between their suppliers and their customers and the whole system that they manage, many times they actually stock up reserves of various critical materials or materials that might be in demand that could be beyond what their customers need just for next month, so that when the asking comes, they can serve them right away. So this whole idea of creating these sort of buffer stocks or consignment stocks or things that enable a just-in-time service level are in essence the same tools that will enable to do it on a national level.
So, as you mentioned, the critical minerals list has grown to 60 some odd companies. When I first started in the industry, I think it was around 20. So, how is this discourse around the critical minerals and this broader focus, how is it kind of working to propel the industry and give, I don't want to say legitimacy, but to really kind of start getting broader community support?
It's work in progress. I think it's pretty clear since everyone was talking about about copper and about rare earths this year that this sort of proliferated. Gold and silver, obviously, popular, even more than cryptocurrencies these days. But that's of course for other reasons. But I think that it's an endless process of basically educating the general population that had a bit of a negative, approach towards our sector. We were not extremely popular, and sometimes maybe it was our fault. But I think it's starting to sink in that all aspects of modern life, not just materials that are dual use because they're military and they're also, consumer electronics, but everything that enables modern life, communication, medicine, transportation, and so on. They all depend on these minerals and all these critical materials. And I think, as Robert Friedland always likes to say, everything is either mined from the crust of the earth or grown on the crust of the earth, and it's very true. So the fact that the list is long doesn't, I think, make it less focused or anything like that. It just maybe even strengthens the point that's made that minerals are really an integral part of our lives, of our modern lives, whether it's through food security, whether it's through communications, and also, unfortunately, from the military aspects. But that's the way it is, and I think it's starting to sink in. But yeah, as an industry, we definitely need to do a lot more grassroots education, communicating, opening up, and I think it's becoming more and more apparent and visible.
Just to close it off, what kind of commodities are most exciting to you these days? Where are you finding the most exciting projects? But where do you see the biggest demand or the biggest need to invest as well?
I think we still need to, focus on anything that has to do with energy in a broader sense. So uranium to make the energy, copper to move it around are definitely areas of focus. But the dual-use materials and the minor metals, and they really are minor, and within the minor segment, only a portion of it actually goes to military applications. But these dual-use materials like antimony and tungsten are important, and there are investment opportunities in that sector. But it's important, I think, to have a holistic approach and to see how it's being explored, how it's being extracted, how it's being processed, and what's the full picture there. So I'm also a big fan of innovation in these spaces and really squeezing out as much as you can from a resource once you started mining it, as opposed to leaving very rich tailings for future generations to process. And that, I guess, leads me to another opportunity, which I think there's so much left behind from previous mines and processing operations, that going back to them and extracting some of these minerals, whether critical or less critical, but still important, is something that can go a long way, and it also is something that can help change the image of our industry, because there is a cleanup and sort of redemption almost aspect to going back to tailings, to dumps, and extracting and cleaning up and rehabilitating. So that's another big opportunity, I think, in terms of how you do it and not just what you're looking for.
Excellent. Well, Erez, I want to thank you for joining us here today at PDAC. Hope you have a successful event. And yeah, thanks.